Hey guys, I'm Jimmy from LelegacyCrafting. Today's video I'll be showing you how I made my V Book.
Now before I get started, consider dropping a like and hitting the subscribe button below to help out my channel. The first thing you're going to need to do is 3D print the V Book covers, so this should include the front and back cover as well as the spine. You're also going to need a bound sketchbook where you can buy at a hobby store. I specifically use this one for the sizing of my V Book cover. Now if you're interested in getting these files yourself, you can either join my Patreon where you can get access to it, or I'll have a link where you can download it for free. So you might notice on these prints that on these detailed parts they might have bumps or artifacts that you're going to need to remove, which leads us to our first step, sanding. You're going to need a medium grit sanding paper or sanding block and start sanding all those little artifacts down. By the end of it, all the detailed surfaces should be smooth. For this part, you're going to need to grab the book and we're going to correct the spine. So on our second step, we're going to fix the spine by heating it up with a heat gun or hair dryer until it's malleable enough to mold onto the spine. So as you can see, I'm just going to heat it up enough where the plastic itself is flexible enough where I can mold it around the spine. For this section, you might have to heat one section at a time before you mold it around the spine. If you heat the whole thing at once, by the time you get to the other end, it might have cooled already. So just be patient with this part and take your time. If you gotta redo it, then you just apply more heat. By the end of it, the 3D printed part should fit perfectly with the spine of the book. You should be able to slide it on and off. At this point, you should be already done sanding all the details and surfaces of the 3D printed parts. Once you're satisfied with that, we're going to go on to our next step. So step 3 is priming. You can use any primer slash filler that you like to use. I personally, from experience, like to use flat crystal clear. That's just my preference. Now that the primer is all fully dried, you're going to need to go to step 4, which is fine sanding. So just grab your finest sanding block or sandpaper, and like on the other step, you're going to have to sand all the surfaces down again. Now we're going to move on to step 5, painting. So there's no perfect way to paint this book, but V's book is pretty sure it's leather, so we're going to try to emulate that. So from our experience, we have this weird method of spray painting. So the first thing we do is like to spray paint the edges black like this. We're trying to get into all the little cracks with the black. That way later on when we put on the brown or in the final touches, we don't miss paint. So this is just like a precautionary spray to make sure that at least the edges are black and we don't have to worry about this yellow 3D print. This will also help later with its leather look. So once it dries, you'll see what I mean. So for this, we like to use two different browns. We have a light brown and a dark brown. This one is the light brown right now. So what we're doing is applying a full coat of light brown onto the surfaces of the piece. Now you can see that if I did miss any spots on the edges, the black that we sprayed down earlier, it covered that spot. It's also giving the book a weathering effect or leather effect, and it's something that we like to do now because we don't like to do it post-process. Now in theory, you could paint it all brown and then go back in with black acrylic and weather it yourself, but when we have to make multiple copies or make this repeatedly, we kind of want to save our time, so we just do it now to save a lot of time. Now you can see that I'm going in with a darker brown, and this is what's gonna help really emulate that leather look. Just spray it on random areas. There's no perfect way or perfect place to spray it. You just want to add this leather look to it. And lastly, we're gonna sprinkle in some black paint to finally wrap it up. So we're just splattering or spray painting a little bit of black to the edges on the corners. Try to not focus on the center, just want to splatter on the edges. Again, this is just our method of painting the book. You can paint it however you like. Everyone has a different method when it comes to weathering or how leather looks. This is just our preferred method. Now that the paint has fully dried, we're going to move on to step 6, which is applying gold rub and buff. The only areas that we're going to apply this gold to is anything that's raised off the surface right now. All the little details is where we're going to apply the gold. Now this can be very tedious and very long. Take your time on this part, because if you slip by accident and get it onto an area that you don't want the gold rub and buff on, it's going to be hard to take it off. Now, as a reminder, I recommend wearing a respirator or mask. The fumes from this stuff is still pretty strong, so just for extra precaution, wear a mask. Once you finished applying all the gold, it should look something like this. So all the details should be nice and even. If it isn't, just apply more gold, I guess. But just take your time. To seal up your work, I recommend using some kind of clear gloss and just spray paint it. Now grab your handy dandy sketchbook, and we're gonna make a small little change to it before we apply the covers on it. So you can see this little elastic strap. We're gonna need to take it off, so just rip it off. If there's anything in the way like this, take it off. Double check your work, put the cover on top of the book, see if everything fits. You want to get a good view of where everything goes at this point. If it doesn't fit, try to change it as much as you can. You don't really want to heat things back up. It might ruin the paint or warp it. Now grab your favorite super glue, and we're going to move on to step 7, which is gluing. So just put it over the book like this. Apply a good amount of super glue, and then put it onto the surface of the book. Make sure at this point that everything is aligned, because once it hardens, you're not going to be able to change it. So double check. I like to use clamps, and I'll clamp down all the little corners to make sure that it dries evenly. You could use another book or heavy object to put on top of this and let it dry that way. However, in past experience, if you did it like that, sometimes it moves a little bit and it'll mess up the whole thing. So just be wary of that. I'm going to apply the same technique over to the spine. Now for my technique, I like to glue it on and then use the clamps to keep it in place like this. But use whatever method that fits you. Just be careful, because if you make a mistake now, there's no going back. And once it's all dry, there you have it. V Book. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you like this video. Share this video and leave a comment on what we should make next.
If you're interested in buying this book, you can check out my Etsy site where I sell most of the props that I make. You can also try making it yourself. I'll have a link in the description below where you can download the file and 3D print it yourself. If you want to help us make more videos like this in the future, please consider joining our Patreon, where you can get access to a majority of our 3D models, as well as have a huge influence on what we make next. Other than that, you can follow our social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. All the links will be in the description below. Thanks everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.